Hey everyone, and welcome to my show. My name is Nick Elston. I'm a leading inspirational speaker, creator of unique mental health engagement strategies, a transformational speaking coach, and founder of Forging People, a community created to empower, inspire, and educate people who truly want to be heard in life and in business. On these shows, I bring you the storytellers, celebrities, speakers, influencers, entrepreneurs, those who have gone from adversity to excitement, who share their stories with vulnerability, transparency, inspiration, and most importantly, completely unfiltered. So without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of The Nick Elston Show. Hey everyone, and a big welcome back to The Nick Elston Show. It's season 3, episode 15. And as we near the end of November, this season is absolutely up and running with some wonderful guests. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode a day podcast week. Really enjoyed that one. And today we're back to our Friday slot, and we're back to another amazing guy in the shape of Mr. Danny Lloyd.
Thanks very much. What an intro.
You're welcome. Danny Lloyd, thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you here, and I've got every time I chat to you, I've got serious beard envy. You just wear it better than anybody else that I know.
Don't tell Emma that. She hates it.
So, well, let's start with the basics. Tell everybody who you are, what you're about.
Right. Okay. My name's Danny, obviously, as you said. I guess I'd say I'm a double stroke survivor is my sort of backstory, I suppose. But there's a lot more like other health things piled on top of that. They started when I was quite young, which caught me out because the first one I had was when I was 22, and I was like an avid sort of gym goer, fitness, obsessed with the gym and all that sort of stuff. I really sort of got into it, felt like I was going somewhere with it. And then 6 months after like a competition in your Speedos, one of those competitions.
Oh yeah.
This is like an autoimmune condition sort of swept in out of nowhere, and that sort of kicked things off then. And wow. At 22, it was like quite a shock to find out I'd had like a small stroke then, but it sort of manifested itself in sort of weird movements. I think the thing's called chorea. It's a bit like you sort of like writhe around a little bit. It sounds a bit dodgy, but it's in
your Speedos. Danny, you sure you're not kind of pulling my plonker? We are being genuine here, aren't we?
No. It is true. It is a thing. It's just like you sort of can't control like fine sort of motor movements, I suppose. And at the time, I was a draftsman on an old drawing board, which probably don't exist anymore.
Okay.
So hold an ink pen when your fingers are fidgeting around all the time is quite the two things don't marry up particularly well.
So it's like kind of like spasms, was it, or something? Or
it was literally like the feeling. It's hard to describe. It's almost like if I stopped myself fidgeting all the time. When you sit and like jiggle your legs and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like a lot of people do. It was like that, but that type of thing, but in my hands and even in my face and stuff. It was really, really weird.
Wow.
And then if I tried to stop it, it was like the same sort of sensation as holding your breath. So you couldn't sort of stop yourself doing it. And that was how I sort of ended up at the doctors, and they found I had really high blood pressure.
Yeah.
But the condition I have, basically, over time, it causes your blood to sort of thicken. So it sort of goes more like soup. And it's sort of joked about with people who've got it, and that it's like, I refer to it as like sludge blood. It's like this sort of stuff you don't want yourself, so you're certainly not going to be donating it to anyone either.
Yeah.
But so that was like when I was younger, and I tried to carry on the gym stuff, but it was sort of never the same then. I had like fatigue really badly, and for a long time I had this underlying fear it was going to happen again. But there's no sort of cure for it, but it's treatable, fortunately. So it was just managed like for probably getting on 18 years, sort of okay. And if I'm honest, I was took it for granted, I suppose. carried on with other sports and things, which probably shouldn't have done because I was on blood thinners at that point. But sort of did the old, they said not to wrap myself in cotton wool, so I'll latch onto that part of it and ignore the rest of it. So I was doing judo and all sorts of stuff, which is probably not the right thing to do. Like bearing in mind you're likely to bleed and bruise and stuff. But anyway, then when not long, around the time we sort of first met, I think it was a couple of years before that. I was sort of taken ill over Christmas and thought it was it must have been a virus. And then New Year's Eve, I collapsed in the bathroom, and I found out later, I had like a blockage streak, but because my blood pressure was running high, unbeknown to me, the artery behind the clot split. So I ended up with like a hemorrhage streak, which you can't, like with a blockage, if you're quick, in a lot of cases, the hospital can reverse it to break the clot. And a lot of people do very well, but because it was a hemorrhage, obviously once it's bleeding, it's sort of bleeding then. At the time, I lived very close to the local hospital, which was Frenchay, which was then a sort of brain injury sort of specialist hospital, like a trauma unit. So I got blue lighted in there early hours of New Year's Day. Great start to the new year. And then it sort of unraveled from there, really, I guess, because the natural thing for the hospital to do is reverse your blood thinners, which I didn't know, and I don't think they obviously didn't. In someone with the condition, it causes the immune system to overfire. So they reversed it to stop the bleeding, which then kicked my immune system in, which led to this like catastrophic variant, it's called, which then is quite a list. I had the brain sort of injury going on from the stroke. I had kidney failure, adrenal glands failed. And then they started getting on top of that. And then where they sort of try to drain basically the bleed and take the pressure off the brain, I then contracted a brain infection, a bit like meningitis type of thing, I suppose. And it just sort of every time I was going forward, something went backwards. And in the end, I was in hospital from 1st of January until the end of June that year. So literally a full 6 months. That was 3 months as like an inpatient. We were like having medical treatment, and then 3 months in like a rehabilitation unit.
I mean, when you hear the word catastrophic, that's never going to be a good thing, is it?
No, that's right. No, it's not. No, and I think to like add to it, like I was very fortunate that the doctors I had were fantastic, and I think a lot of it was like a learning curve for them, because the catastrophic type is like a typical me is so rare that I think at the time there'd only been recorded about 350 cases like worldwide, like ever. Obviously there's been more, but they weren't picked up, I suppose.
Wow.
So there's no real like treatment protocol. Sort of what do we do? It's sort of all a bit trial and error, I suppose. But for whatever reason, I got through it, and here I am.
I make notes, as you may have saw, as we go through. I really admire my guests who share their story, their lived experience, especially with such humor as you do. And I'm on to my 3rd page of notes already. Really? There's got to be a book in you somewhere, Danny, for sure.
Well, funny you should say that. With I've written a couple of chapters, didn't I? For
Nicky Marshall, yeah.
And the first book I was involved with, I was quite flattered to be involved. Basically, told what I just said, like in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Second book I did, or second chapter, was a men's sort of overcoming mental health problems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because as a teenager, I know you're very familiar yourself. I got diagnosed with general anxiety disorder.
That's right, yeah.
As like a teen. I just thought I was a worrier. Just thought I was one of these like people who worry all the time. And I think for me, from what I remember, it triggered when I left school at 16, when you could do that, and literally went straight into work. And I think the sudden change in that, didn't really know what I wanted to do. sort of drifted into something. I think sort of kick-started it a bit. And then sort of I was like that for a long time, didn't really understand it. Just thought it was just how I was, like just like a warrior sort of thing. And then eventually I had this diagnosis, and ironic, I think I've said to you before I was actually ill, this when I just described it, for a couple of years prior to that, like personal issues and bits and pieces, relationship stuff, I was in like some sort of anxiety, depression. I think I had some sort of breakdown myself.
Yeah.
Leading up to that. So I think I'd hammered my immune system so much over that period of time. And there's no known sort of reason, no definitive reason for why that catastrophic thing kicks off, and I think part of it was because of what happened in the hospital with them unknowing. But a lot of it was, I think, I'd been stressed for about 2 years, which is probably why I had a virus and all those things sort of pile up, really, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I was trying to remember this morning, kind of when I was getting my cup of tea ready for the show. Can I like to do that? I was trying to remember where we first met, because I couldn't recall whether it was at Nicky Marshall's Discover Your Banks conference in Bristol, or whether it was when we were doing the Headway walk, charity walk from Plymouth to Bristol. Can you remember where we first crossed paths?
I think there's actually Emma met you first, because she was attending Headway herself then, because that's our weird backstory, that me and Emma, my partner for everyone, we've both got brain injuries. Says she has suffered hers for an accident. So on paper, we laugh about it. Two people sharing a house, both with brain injuries of one description or another, doesn't sound necessarily good, but it just works because you sort of understand it. And fortunately, she fills in the bits I struggle with, and I can do the same the other way around. Amazing. So it just sort of works, really. But I think she was at Chew Valley Lake with Headway.
That's right.
And
that's right.
That's it. And you guys walked there, and I think she met you and Mark there.
Yeah, and actually Emma and Mark both I would love to get on the show, so I must ask you to remind me of that. Yeah. I think again, but I love the fact that actually, like, and all of that adversity, that actually something like absolutely beautiful has come from that as well, obviously in terms of your relationship. But for those who are not aware, because obviously Mark hasn't been on the show yet, my good friend Mark Brimson, he is an ambassador for Headway Bristol, a brain injury organisation, and he lost his wife. And if she would have recovered from how she was lost, and you'll hear about that in due course, she would have gone to Headway for rehabilitation. Now, because of that, he decided to do this charity walk from Plymouth Argyle Football Club in Devon to Bristol Rovers Football Club in Bristol. For those who don't know, it's a long way. And I think it worked out about 130, 140 miles over the space of a week. And me being me, when he said, "Do you want to do this?" Yeah, let's do it. Thinking it sounded so much easier when you had your dressing gown on, your slippers, thinking, yeah, we'll do that next year. That'd be great. And we did this charity walk, and such an amazing experience. And you'll hear more about that when Mark comes on the show. But I kind of remember so vividly that kind of moment where Chew Valley, actually, where Danny just mentioned, that it's a local kind of beauty spot, lakes and stuff. And we were coming over the hill up from Somerset in towards Bristol. So they're kind of like coming onto the last leg of that kind of journey. And we didn't know this as the walkers, we didn't know that. But as we come round, we just saw a couple of minibuses turned up and some amazing people there to kind of welcome us and support us and kind of cheer us along the way. And of course, Emma was one of those people that was there. And now you mentioned that, I kind of remember that so clearly. That was such an emotional point for everybody, for them, for us. It just felt such a very huggy moment. Man, I've missed hugs over the past 18 months. But yeah, so actually from that point, that's kind of where our worlds started to collide, because obviously through that, I attended the Headway Ball in Bristol and had the pleasure of having a night out on the Raz with you both. You got far more energy than I would, trust me. And then you had the pleasure of sharing a stage in Bristol as well, didn't we? So for Nikki Marshall's Discover Your Bounce event, that was the first time I heard about your story. And I just thought it was so powerful. And I'm sure people that are listening to this right now that will really resonate with people. How easy has it been for you to share that story with an audience? And also, is that something that you've always had confidence in doing, or again, is that something that you've learned along the way?
No, I guess I never had any experience of sort of public speaking as such. I suppose the only time was anything like that was in my job, where you're sort of put on the spot in the boardroom type of thing, and sort of you'd have to think on your feet a little bit, or on your backside sitting down. What do I do here? So that was it really. And I think hadn't sort of done a lot. And yet it's funny you ask that, because I thought about telling my story, a while back, just for people who might be struggling, just to sort of with a sort of message, if I can do it, anyone can do it really. And I know initially it really worried me that if I was trying to tell my story, whether I would, find it too emotional to do.
Yeah.
And I did think I would be like that initially. And then, through yourself, through different people, I did your speaking academy.
Yes.
Excuse me, in Bristol before, which is very good. And I sort of done little bits and pieces sort of along the way. And then gradually that sort of, over emotion, fear sort of fell out of it really, because I think the sort of message and the point to it is sort of bigger than the sort of like how you sort of feel about it. Well, it wasn't so much I was bothered about the emotional part. It's that being over emotional. Like the last thing someone wants to do is see someone who starts crying his eyes out, and can't understand what we're sort of saying.
And actually, it's interesting that even despite what you shared today on this show, that after spending a day of you doing these interactive exercises, there's so much more of Danny Lloyd that's actually even out there, isn't it? That you've got a lot more stories along the way. You kind of alluded to kind of relationships before, and what life is like now and where it's going, and positive and negative. You shared all those experiences, and it does take a lot of control in that emotional well-being, but you did it so brilliantly. And I think what you do is you empower people through your lived experience. I've said for a long time that lived experience is the perfect vehicle to get people from that point of having a problem to the solution, but it's not the solution. And I think that when we start to recognize our part in that, we can manage ourselves a lot better emotionally, because we know we're not trying to fix everybody. How have you found that with your role with the Stroke Association? That you are obviously a champion, you are somebody to inspire people, but I know you're a humble guy as well, and that won't sit well with you.
No, I think I was just thinking that as you were saying that, actually, that was one of the early sort of presentations I did. Was actually to a group of teachers over in Newport. And that was really good, because the Stroke Association, as an ambassador, they provide you with like a, what do I call it, like a template, I guess, of a presentation.
Okay, yeah.
And it's sort of, the sort of facts and numbers and what happens and those sorts of things. It's really good. And then you can either sort of stick to the script, if you like, or they encourage you, if you've got like your own story, to sort of bring that into it. And I think the standard one has like other people like nationally who've told their stories. There's been a few adverts on TV from the Stroke Association in recent years. You had the sort of option of pulling those out of it and telling your own story, sort of thing. So I've done a couple of times, which has been very good, because I suppose no one knows your own story quite like yourself, really. That's been quite good.
It's good for you, mate. And obviously you shared kind of where you come from. What does life look like right now for you, for Emma? What's life look like right now?
Brilliant. I actually, despite all that stuff, which isn't the most positive thing, but brilliant. I can't fault anything really. There's like nothing I wouldn't change in a weird sort of way. I don't know if you feel like it now, that I'm sort of happy it happened, which might sound a bit odd,
I get that.
because I think through all that you find out what you're actually really about. Like either, well, classic, you know, corny statement, if it doesn't break you, you know, it does literally, you know, make you stronger and pull things out of you. And I think, you know, recently I've even had it, if I rewind a bit, when I was in the rehabilitation center, they talk a lot about if you don't, or what you sort of regain and where you get to, you have like a 2-year window. It's sort of encouraged or sort of stated a lot. And for me, because I was quite motivated anyway, that was sort of a stressor, because I had this fixed idea that if I didn't get to where I wanted to be within those 2 years, I was stuck, sort of thing, which actually isn't the case at all. And I realized afterwards, I think they do that to keep people motivated, perhaps who aren't motivated. Whereas I'm sort of completely the other way. And like friends and people I speak to now, you know, who've helped me with lots of things, constantly say to you, you need to rein yourself in rather than like be pushed along. And I think that sort of was like a big part of it for me.
Are you truly being heard in life, in education, in business? Your ability to deliver any message with clarity, power and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success, personally and professionally. Forging People, founded by Nick Elston, is an online community developed to empower, inspire, engage and educate you to truly step up. Complete with online courses, early access to in-person coaching and events, free resources and a community of like-minded people, Forging People will help you manage anxiety, boost confidence and give you the tools to speak to any audience, whether it's one person or 1 million people. Speaking is more than just standing on stage. Speaking is business. Speaking is leadership. Speaking is influencing. Speaking is life. Contact Nick's team today on pa@nickelston.com or visit nickelston.com today to register your interest. This is the sign you've been looking for.
Sorry,
Do you think it's that kind of competitive edge, that competitive sports person in you?
I think it is definitely something like that, because when I was in the rehabilitation center, there was like a small sort of gym there for sort of sorry, someone's fitting a carpet next door, if you can hear bang.
That's okay, no worries. We don't edit on it, we'll keep that in. Pop in and say hello if you want, it's not a problem.
It was, I suppose that competitive thing has always been there. And when I was in rehab, there's like a little gym there, and I was always sort of there on time, you know, ready to go, sort of thing. Whereas other people, you know, different backgrounds, different affected differently, I suppose, sort of always found it like a chore, whereas I was used to that sort of thing. And then the thing for me was the frustration, because like fortunately I didn't really lose any cognitive function. Mine was all physical, like my balance is shocking. So I remember being so frustrated that I was sort of in a room with people who, you know, it sounds really mean, but some of them did not know their own names and had forgotten their families, couldn't remember their own children. It's really sad, really. Yet for a long time, I suppose, I ignored all that and was sort of like just purely thinking about myself, I guess. And there was a guy there who I became good friends with in his family, and he had all sorts of cognitive problems, yet physically he was fine. You know, he could do all this stuff. Yeah, I was sort of sat there, literally from sitting. You had to learn to sit from sitting down to stand up, like something we all do. And you take, it's amazing what you take for granted. And he could do it, and I couldn't. And that used to drive me absolutely nuts, because I, you know, in my thinking, I think this guy didn't even know his own name half the time, and his own family, and yet he can stand up and sit down, and I can't. And to me, logically, that made no sense. And I had a similar experience when I was discharged, and headway was suggested to me early on. I went for about a year, I think, which I was a bit reluctant to start with, and then I sort of did get a lot of benefit from it at the time. But the first time I went was to just sort of view it, and it was in the summer, and they had a barbecue, and we're playing cricket at Hambrook. I know that wouldn't mean much necessary to a lot of people. And I remember going along, sort of being really sort of a bit embarrassed, a bit self-conscious, and looking at people there thinking, I really don't fit in with these people. You know, they're nothing like me, you know, and I'm sort of almost judging them, I guess, which is, you know, it is wrong. But then they said, oh, why don't you join in? And I was like really, really reluctant, thinking, I don't want to do this. Bit sort of, you know, I'm too good for this, I suppose, that sort of feeling. And then they said, why don't you go wicket keeper? So I did. And then really quickly, I was like knocked off my high horse pretty fast, because the first ball come in, it's probably hilarious to watch it. You know, if you're someone watching it, the ball come in, the batsman missed it as expected, and it just rolled past me. And I almost fell over, turning around to go after it. And I remember trying to initially wanting to run to get it, and I couldn't. And then I remember trying to walk even quickly and almost fell over. And then by the time we got to pick this ball up and turn round, the guy who'd missed it had ran about 4 times. And I remember turning around thinking, no, I do exactly fit in here. You know, like what was I thinking?
Yeah.
And it was like a real sort of slap down, I suppose, and like a reality check. I've had a few of these.
I mean, how in this month, especially where we kind of celebrate Men's Mental Health Awareness in November, how much of being a man and being an alpha guy as well, somebody who's a bodybuilder, weight trainer, competitive sports person, how much did that kind of contribute to that feeling of like, well, this isn't me, that kind of stuff? Did that play a part, being a man having to kind of navigate those adversities?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, and I was never, I guess I've never been like a bragger or anything like that, but I suppose, oh, sorry, the cat's making a racket now.
You've got beautiful cats as well.
Carpet guy and a cat. What could be better?
So one of my few memories from being on Instagram was pictures of your cat. So they're beautiful.
Oh yeah, yes. Oh yeah, he's quite vocal. Yeah, I suppose it was like I've never been into that sort of, you know, showing off, like showy type of thing. But I guess, you know, from another point of view, I knew what I was capable of, sort of thing. And I've, as you sort of, you know, alluded to earlier, where I've always pushed myself and been able to, because I couldn't do that, you know, in the context I was used to, that was like really, really difficult. Yeah. And I think that was one of the hardest things. And what I've had to learn over time, and a really good friend of mine, he's a support worker, but we've become like really, really good friends. Sort of got into my head for ages. I was sort of stuck in the woe is me type of thing, I guess. You know, I can't do all these things, all this sort of stuff I did. And he sort of almost in like one conversation sort of knocked that out of me, really, because he sort of said, you know, you keep focusing on these things you can't do, but there's probably a million things you can't do. But there probably was a million things you couldn't do before you had a stroke. You know, why don't you focus on the millions of things you can do? And I never even considered thinking of it that way, Rain, until that point. Yeah, and then so that's what we've done ever since. You know, certain things, even at the gym, I go to the gym still. Like I go about 5 times a week. Bit obsessive, but the things I do there are different to what I used to do. Yeah, because I can't do things that require a lot of balance and coordination and stuff like that. But you know, gyms are big places, and they're getting better all the time. Yeah. So you just find the things you can do. And you know, literally in recent months, having said that about the 2-year thing, everything sort of fell into place, where I actually had like a aha moment literally a couple of months ago, thinking I've actually got like a really nice balance now with what I do, what I don't do, in terms of the gym stuff, you know, my home life, the things I do. I started doing Tai Chi early on in my recovery.
What's Tai Chi? Pardon my naivety.
No, it's actually, I suppose a lot of people think of it alongside yoga and stuff like that.
Okay.
There's different sort of how it's thought of here, and this is exactly my understanding of it. It was exercise for old people, is what I thought it was. Really boring, of like no interest in me at all.
I love your honesty, mate. It's so refreshing to have the humor involved in these conversations.
A clinical psychologist, actually, when I was in rehab, he knew my background in judo and bits and pieces, and at that point I was convinced I would go back to it. They're completely deluded. And this psychologist wasn't a physiotherapist, anything like that. He said to me, I think I've got some of that you might really like with your judo background. And he discovered it because he'd done karate for years and got injured. And while he was injured, he started practicing it. And when he suggested to me doing Tai Chi initially, I was really offended. And I was acting like a spoiled brat. And I said to him, I'm not effing doing exercise for old people, and I sat there, and he said, calm down. Let me try it for 5-10 minutes and see what you think. If you don't like it, we'll forget it. And I had to wait for him. Like, bless him, he'd finished his shift and he did it in his own time after he'd finished work. And I was sort of marching up and down thinking, he's late. If he's not here in a minute, I'm going. I'm not doing it. Then he came and I was like, oh, he's showed up. I'm going to have to go through with it now. And I did. And within 5 minutes, I thought, this is brilliant. And I found a teacher local who's, ironically, his son had suffered a brain injury years ago. So he had sort of experienced himself of it, which is, again, another weird coincidence. But he's so dedicated to it. And that's what he does as his full-time sort of job.
Amazing.
And I've done it ever since. I've been doing it like about 7-8 years now. And it's completely changed my life, really. So I do that alongside the gym stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of keep the principles of both going, I suppose. Because when I went to see him at first, I could barely stand up in his sort of, because he teaches from home in his lounge. I remember leaning against his lounge wall. Whereas now I can do parts of, they call it like the form, which is like a dance, I suppose. I can, go through those routines and things like that. And the principles, I practice things most days, I suppose, but completely changed like my outlook. And I found out since it's actually, a martial art, and a guy who's, in the sort of style it is a family sort of lineage. And the excuse me, the son of the Grand Master, as they call them, he comes to England before the pandemic every year for a week. And I've met him and trained with him with a class. But he unbelievable when you see it done, as a martial art. I would never have believed that's what it was about before. It's like, like the Shaolin monks and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Looks like that when it's done properly.
Nice.
It's and I've seen this particular guy do things, one in particular to a 6-foot doorman, that I wouldn't believe that you couldn't even see what he did. And to this day, I've heard through this guy's friend, he still can't work out what he did, and still thinks he was tricked. And the guy is
going to be doing my research on this. This sounds fascinating.
It is good.
Everything that you're mentioning, kind of in terms of what you love to do, how you've recovered, what you support, and kind of your causes and stuff, they're all based around community. Obviously, we're currently, as we record this in October, we're currently at the point where lockdown has been kind of released. But how has the last 18 months been for you, especially from a lockdown perspective, when so much of your positive kind of recovery and recharging time comes from community?
Right. So I'm laughing, so I sort of know what I'm going to say. Right at the beginning, when they sort of had the feeling lockdown was going to come, myself and Emma, Emma and I, as you're supposed to say, we
it's me, mate. We can just talk as openly as you want and improperly as you want. You're good. No apologies needed.
We decided we were going to sort of start doing it about a week, 2 weeks before it actually happened.
Yeah.
And because Emma's like me, like with the gym and her fitness and stuff, and she'd got into rowing, which she now does on the water, which is, I find, amazing. that she sort of does that with a club. But right at the beginning of lockdown, when people were panicked buying toilet rolls and all this sort of stuff.
That's the
Yeah, that's it. All that.
Yeah.
Emma came in and said, "Oh, I've just panic bought something." And I said, "What have you bought?" "A rowing machine." And she bought
That's
this.
a really good shout.
And she bought this this like real high quality rowing machine that you get in gyms and stuff. And it was actually, like you say, turned out a brilliant shape, because almost the next day you couldn't buy one anywhere, and she had actually secured it and it came. And to her credit, I think she used that every day over that like full lockdown. And I think partway through, on her anniversary of her accident, she rode a marathon, which took her about 3 hours and 58 minutes. I always say 4 hours, but she always corrects me, because it's 2 minutes under.
Wow.
I think overall, because it like records the meterage you do, she did almost 2 million meters or something, which I can do about 5 minutes, and I think that I've had enough of that. I don't know how she does it really. But and I had some sort of stuff here, a couple of kettlebells and things like that.
Yeah.
So we just sort of made do, and we're quite lucky. We got a patio area.
Yeah.
So weather was quite good on some days. So
yeah,
I just sort of kept things going, like ticking over really.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, it was sort of like that. And because of my family, and we got friends around who are really good.
Yeah.
If we needed anything, there was sort of no problem with that. So if any of them are watching, thank you. It was appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, just sort of kept occupied really.
Yeah, good for you.
I read a lot as well. I read a lot, which I never used to do.
See, everyone's got bookshelves on Zoom calls and stuff. I want to make sure you actually do read these books. And I'm just...
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, for a while, I've actually curbed it. I did have a habit of this sort of compulsive book buying, where I would think, "Oh, that sounds a good book," and I start reading it, and then I get like a few lines or a chapter into it, and it'd talk about a particular subject, and I think, "Well, that sounds interesting." So then I'd order that book, and then the book would come, and I start reading that one. So I probably got hundreds of books with about a chapter that I read and nothing else.
You and me both, mate. I got magpie syndrome when it comes to that. Absolutely, I get that. Yeah. Mate, thank you so much for being on the show. The question I ask every guest that comes onto the show is this. So I'm going to set the scene. I'm now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. Yeah. 20,000 people paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you, Danny Lloyd, deliver your keynote talk. You're kicking back in the green room. You hear your walk-on music kick in, that song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. Danny Lloyd, what would that track be and why?
The track for me is a recent find, actually. It's called "How'd You Like Me Now" by the band called The Heavy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know it. Yeah.
I know. It's actually on one of my playlists from my stuff. It's
brilliant.
Really? Yeah, really good.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I'd never heard of it before. I never heard of them. And I can't even think where I first heard it. Probably pinched it from you. Now you said that.
So if it's the same track as I'm thinking of, it may not be. But actually, the original is a country track, which is where it comes into my world.
Okay, makes sense. It probably is actually.
Yeah, How'd You Like Me Now by no, it's gone. Anyway, check it out. Great track, and that, along with everybody else's, will be on the playlist available at the end of the season. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, nice.
How'd You Like Me Now, Danny Lloyd. Big round of applause.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. You've been an absolutely great guest. Thank you for giving up your time to be on the show. And excited, we're going to get Emma on. We're going to get Mark on as well. And that really contribute a different dimension to your story as well. But hand on heart, I love the way that you share what you share. You share it with humor, with honesty and transparency. It's completely unfiltered. And for anybody who's first met Danny today, what you see is what you get. I guarantee you, what you see is what you get when you meet in person. So thank you. And all the very best, and we'll catch you again very shortly. But for everybody else, please stay tuned for the next episode. Next Friday, we have an amazing lady doing wonderful things in the shape of Lucy Cohen. So stay tuned for that. Do hit like and subscribe and all that jazz. And in the meantime, take care, be happy, and stay well. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. And that's a wrap. A big thank you for tuning into today's episode. Please do leave us a like and hit subscribe for the fantastic upcoming episodes that I will be bringing to you, featuring more amazing guests. But for now, be well, be happy, be safe, and remember, as I always say, it's what you do next that counts. Until next time on the Nick Elston Show, take care. I'll see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.